Science is an evolving subject, and so no scientist can say that they have complete information, and nobody can say there's absolutely no risk. So of course there's a risk. So therefore you have to assess the risk with all the available information. And that is the key, to make sure that all of the information, positive and negative, is submitted. So therefore there is a criticism by many people that the dossiers that are submitted to EFSA are only dossiers prepared by the companies. And so obviously the companies would present data that is more favourably disposed to their varieties and products. We have in the scientific literature a thing called publication bias, that literature with positive findings are more likely to be published than issues with negative findings. And so we have this all the time with pharmaceutical agents, that if the pharmaceutical agent is funded by a drug company and there's 10 trials and 9 of them work and 1 doesn't work, well, the 9 that are working will be published and the 1 that doesn't work might not be published. So this is the point about we probably need much more publicly funded research. Long-term trials, nobody can forecast the future, so you just sort of make a guesstimate on the balance of probability on the evidence that's at your disposal. That's how you do the assessments. Now, the one thing that's interesting is that on many of the panels in EFSA, they're populated by experts who are comfortable with the technology. And so if you have a lot of molecular scientists who have been playing around with recombinant DNA technology since 1969, it's not a new technology, and so many of them use it in their laboratories and their research institutions, and they're quite comfortable with it. And so for them, they wouldn't see the same risks that maybe a citizen would see, or someone that wasn't familiar with the technology. It's like, you go to a motorbike convention and ask the motorbike riders, do you think riding a motorbike is dangerous? They say no, whereas other people think they're half crazy. So that's an issue. I suppose if could the risk assessment process be improved? Of course it could. Of course it could be improved, and it is being improved continuously, and with more and more guidelines. Could it be revamped completely? And could there be a completely different procedure required to enter the approvals process into the European Union? Of course there could, but that would be a decision taken by the Commission. If they actually said, look, we want EFSA to do things in a completely different fashion, of course EFSA is not independent in the sense EFSA does what the legislation mandates it to do. And EFSA doesn't actually set its own rules. The ground rules for EFSA are set in the founding regulations of EFSA. Well, I would think, the publicly funded research would give people more confidence. I mean, I have no evidence that the corporate companies who submit data submit incomplete data, but there is a huge issue with consumer confidence, and so the consumers would be more confident if we had more publicly funded research where the researchers had no vested interest in getting their products over the line. That's one thing. Basically, perhaps we should have anthropologists or social scientists engaged and look at the other dimensions to the technology if you're considering the wider issues like ethical issues, etc. But at the moment it's a food safety risk assessment and an environmental risk assessment. But if you were to consider the other issues, you would need other disciplines sitting around the table. EFSA has no role in risk management, and basically it just assesses the risk, and that risk assessment is passed on to the risk managers who make the decisions. Now, risk managers, they have to take lots of other things into consideration. They have to take in the economic impact of adopting or not adopting the technology. They have to take into account issues like ethical considerations. They have to take into consideration consumer resistance. And so they have a range of other considerations that they think. And so it's at that second stage that a lot of the additional dimensions have to be debated. So often a risk assessor could say that in their opinion this product is as safe as conventional counterpart, whereas the risk managers could say, well, look, it's not a priority for us. Do we need this product? We don't need this product. And so you could actually so what EFSA does isn't necessarily adopted immediately by the risk managers. And there's another delay that the biotechnologies complain about. There's 2 bottlenecks, they say, in the process. One is the initial step with EFSA, and then there's a much longer bottleneck with the Standing Committee and the Commission. But these things can be rushed, and basically people have to have confidence in the process. And if people haven't got confidence in the process, well, then the process has to be changed. The EFSA assessment is more comprehensive and it's more onerous than in other jurisdictions. And so in fact, in many of the grain growing countries, new varieties are being developed, licensed and planted far faster than the EU approvals process. And this is what's happening in that there's an issue with the EU approved varieties are allowed to be imported into the European Union, but there's a lot of GM varieties that are not approved by the European Union because of the time delay in both the EFSA component of the assessment and the Commission component of the approvals process. And so, you know, other jurisdictions remark how stringent the process is in the European Union. And it's interesting that, you know, those people who are very, very, very concerned about the technology say that EFSA is too easy. So there's probably a balance there in the middle somewhere. Yeah, well, I mean, it's a much faster process and it's not nearly as onerous. And it's for a biotech company to get their products approved is much, much easier outside of the European Union. The Americans have confidence in it, but European citizens wouldn't accept that same arrangement. Now people say, why are we so nervous in the European Union about new technologies? Well, like we had the BSE crisis and we had the dioxin crisis, and basically I think it's EFSA sees itself as a consumer protection agency, not something to rubber stamp biotechnology dossiers. So we would like to think in EFSA that we're actually acting on behalf of the consumer and we're actually a protector of the consumer. Now, while many consumers believe that, there is a subset that think that EFSA isn't stringent enough. And I mean, if the assessment process in EFSA has to be modified to try and bring more people on side and give people confidence in the process, so be it. There are ongoing discussions about whether the feeding trials are long enough and do we need longer studies to give people additional confidence. And I mean, that's under discussion at the moment and that may change. If we want in EFSA to have consumer confidence, we have to be open and transparent, and the public have to understand everything that's involved with the process of the risk assessment. And there's a dilemma in that when companies submit dossiers, they maintain this is confidential commercial information, and the idea that this information, if the information was made public, their competitors would have access to it. But I think it's in the interest of consumer confidence that as much data as possible is in the public domain, and if scientists want to repeat the trials, but these trials are expensive to run, and so the likelihood that somebody would repeat the trials you know, is low unless we have public funding. And I think, you know, there should be more publicly funded research in the area, and that data should be all made public. And the more open and transparent we are, people will understand the process. And if there are flaws, those flaws have to be addressed. And if there are actually consumer concerns about particular issues, they have to be addressed. And if particular varieties are a cause of concern and there are other issues that citizens are worried about, they should be addressed. I mean, the thing is that we cannot force feed European citizens products that they don't want. We live in a democracy. People have a right to have objections. And if people don't want the technology, they have a right not to have it. And so I think the idea of marginalizing subsets or some member states who actually are anti-technology, that's wrong. We have to actually be as inclusive as we possibly can.